This video is a more detailed look at solar power. Hi, this is Everyday Prepper, welcome to the channel. Now in the last video I showed you how to hook up a solar panel to a charge controller to a battery and then put an inverter on the battery and various other bits and pieces that you can power from the battery as a very simple solar power system. What I did promise to talk about was a more in-depth description of each component and also show you how to properly size your wires, your cables, to allow for the kind of current that you're going to be using. So I'm going to talk quick. Hopefully this video won't be quite as long as the last one, but I am going to go into a lot of detail. I'm going to give you links in the description as to where you can find all this information as well and do some research yourself. Please do some research yourself. I've spent years doing all of the research to set up my systems. It's very, very hard to portray it all in one video, if you know what I mean. So first of all, the solar panel. The solar panel you saw, which is over there, is a monocrystalline solar panel. The only two types of solar panel that I really have come across are, I know there are other types, but the main two really are monocrystalline and polycrystalline. They use silicon, and the crystals of silicon with a monocrystalline is one type from one source. So it's the same silicon and it's uniform throughout the whole panel, which means it's much more pure. Those are much more efficient than polycrystalline. Polycrystalline are from, my understanding is it's from lots of different sources, so it's less efficient, it's not as pure. I've had some people turn around to me and say, no, polycrystalline are much more effective and efficient. Absolute rubbish. I don't know where they get that information from. If you do a search across the whole net, ask ChatGPT, ask Google, monocrystalline are much more efficient, and especially in low light conditions. So as far as I'm concerned, the matter's closed. I've always used monocrystalline. I've never used polycrystalline. Monocrystalline is slightly more expensive. The reason they're more expensive is because they're more efficient. Simple as. So don't listen to any of that rubbish. Next is charge controller. Solar panel goes into the charge controller before it goes into your battery. Your charge controller, there's two main types of charge controller. One is a PWM charge controller, which stands for pulse width modulation. Basically what they do is they will pulse power at your battery until your battery is full. It doesn't go through all the different charging states that an MPPT charger would. MPPT stands for maximum power point tracking. Now I've gone through this in a lot more detail in a previous video. I'll put a link up here because it's all the detail you need to know really is in there. But I always use, or generally use, MPPT chargers for my electric fence out protecting the chickens. I just use my PWM charger. It's cheap. It's really easy to rig up. I've got a few of these stashed so that in the event of a grid down scenario, I've got batteries laying around the house. I could just rig one of these up really, really simply to a solar panel and a battery, and I'd have LED lighting around the house and that kind of stuff. But I use MPPT charge controllers, and the reason for that is, again, in the UK, if you get cloudy days where you're not getting as much voltage from your solar panel, then the MPPT can maximise that voltage and still get a decent charge into your battery, whereas a PWM won't do that. It won't adjust the voltages. It basically takes whatever the solar panel gives it. So although you might have a really efficient solar panel, in low light, or if it's partially covered by cloud and that kind of stuff, then your PWM charger is not really going to get the maximum out of that panel, whereas your MPPT will do. Next is the battery. So I've already talked about the different types of battery. I'm using a LiFePO 4, which is kind of the most, well, pretty much the most modern battery you can get. They have a battery management system inside to help prevent them being overcharged or over discharged or charged too quickly. So they kind of will block the charge if it gets too much. So you can't really go wrong with one of these, except they are much more expensive. As I said, the prices are coming down. The other type of battery is a lead acid battery. If you are going to use lead acid battery, make sure you use a leisure battery, not a car battery, because a car battery is designed for a large discharge of current to start your car. It's not designed for lots of ongoing discharges and recharges and discharges and recharges, and that's what a leisure battery is geared up for. Don't ask me how they're put together or what ways they're put together. They're different from each other. I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't make any difference to my solar setup. Next we have inverters. So this is a 300 watt inverter. There's different types of inverter. This one is called a pure sine wave inverter. What the inverter does is it converts power from your battery, which is DC power, direct current, which is kind of on a line is like this, whereas it converts it to AC, which is alternating current, which on an oscilloscope would go like this. It does that using certain resonance and feedback loops in its circuitry. These are much more expensive than modified sine waves. There are other ones as well, I can't remember. But modified sine waves, basically they will convert it so that it looks like this. So it's kind of like it looks like a sine wave, but it's not quite a sine wave. The problem with those, and those are, you'll probably see more of those on the internet than anything else, modified sine waves. They'll run a lot of devices, but certain things like certain motors and sensitive electronics, they won't power. So you need to be careful with that. I'd just have a safe bet and go for pure sine wave inverters. Rather than modified sine wave, and that way it will convert it much better. It'll run anything as long as it's within the wattage that it's rated for. So this is a 300 watt inverter. I've got on my main system, I've got a 1500 watt inverter, which will go up to a maximum of 3000 watts as an initial surge, but it will run something constantly at around 1500 watts. I think the most I've really run is about 1300 watts on there, and it's been absolutely fine. Now we're going to talk about watts, watt hours, volts, amps and everything else, and we're going to use something called Ohm's law. Look it up. It's really simple. If you can do a bit of maths, which you would need to if you're sizing a solar power system, just on this point, some people don't want to complicate things. Well, even if you was to buy one of these all powers systems where it's all in one, it tells you where to plug stuff, you just plug it in and off you go. You know, even if you're running a household and you want to know if you have a fuse blow, surely you want to know why you're replacing a certain type of fuse with, you know, a 30 amp fuse rather than a 15 amp fuse and what have you. It's pretty easy to work out. So let's talk about that now. There's a variation of Ohm's law called the power formula. Basically how that works is the power in watts is the voltage times by the current. So let's say, how I work out the capacity of this battery, for instance, right? This battery is 12.8 times 30 amps. Most leisure batteries, there'll be 12 volts. So let's just go with 12 volts because everything's on a 12 volt system, right? For ease of calculation. So 30 amp hours just means that that's the storage capacity, is 30 amp hours. So if you multiply 12 by 30, can't do it in my head, 12 times 30 is 360. So I know I probably should do it 12.8, but let's just make it easy because everything's 12 volt is what we're running on now, right? So 12 times 30 is 360. So that would be 306, because it's voltage times amps, that's how many watts. So that battery will run a device that draws 300 watts for 1 hour. So you could then say, well, what will it run for 3 hours? Well, it'll run 120 watts for 3 hours. It'll run one device at 360 watts for 1 hour, or 3 devices at 120 watts each for 1 hour. Total of 360 watts. And that's because that works out as 360 watt hours. So 1 watt hour is 1 watt for an hour. 360 watt hours is 360 watts for 1 hour. Let's look at it another way. And again, please look this up or go on Google or ChatGPT, whatever you need to do to get your head around this. Because I use this for all of my systems, okay? Now, I'm not doing this in any particular order because I'm going to cover wire sizes and voltage drops and things like that in a second. So we've got a 300 watt inverter. So if I want to run something at 300 watts, bearing in mind this converts it to 230 volts AC. So out of that plug, is coming 230 volts. And let's say I've got an appliance at 300 watts. Right, quick calculation. 300 watts, divide that by the voltage, which is 230 volts, gives me 1.3. So out of here, this is delivering 300 watts at 1.3 amps because it's 230 volts. Because the voltage is higher, the current is very low. However, the inverter is actually drawing those 300 watts from the battery. Now, the battery is only at 12 volts, not 230 volts. All the conversion goes on inside here, but the power is still the same. So you've still got to get 300 watts out of that battery. So 300 divided by only 12 volts, 300 divided by 12 volts is 25. So it's drawing, so this is drawing 25 amps from the battery and giving it out at 1.3 amps, albeit a higher voltage. So the higher the current, the lower the voltage, the higher the voltage, the lower the current, because you times one to get the other. So you times voltage and current to get your power in watts. If you've got your watts and you divide it by current, which is amps, you'll get the voltage. If you divide the watts, which is power, divide that by the voltage, you'll get amps, which is the current. Hopefully that makes sense. If not, study some maths. So, how is this important in regards to wire size? Now, let me explain something. In my previous video, I said, I think I laboured home the point, because I've just watched it. I think I pretty much laboured the point. And I'm going to labour it again. There's a reason for this. Is that you would, apart from your charge controller, everything else gets directly connected to your battery. The reason I've laboured this point is I've had more than one person tell me they're a qualified solar power installer and they have wired the, on systems I've seen they've done, have wired their inverter to their charge controller and not directly to the battery. Now, the reason I need to bring this up, this is really important, regardless of my battery size. Let's say I've got an inverter that is 2000 watts. I've got a 2000 watt inverter. So what that means is it's converting whatever comes out of the battery from DC, it's converting into 230 volts, and it's going to power devices of up to 2000 watts. 2000 watts divided by 230 volts is 8.69 amps. So 8.5 amps is what it's emitting. But to draw that from a 12 volt battery, if you divide 2000 watts by 12 volts, 2000 watts divided by 12 volts is 166 amps. Now, 166 amps is not going to go through a wire like this, which is probably rated for about, it's 10 AWG. I'm going to go through that in a bit more detail. So 10 AWG is about 30 to 35 amps. We need 166 amps. Now the wires that I use for pretty much all my systems, apart from my electric fence, because that doesn't require an inverter, is this kind of wire here, right? So this is battery connecting wire. And this is where I've got batteries that are connected together, I use this kind of wire. And this handles currents of up to 200 amps. Now let me demonstrate something. I could potentially have an inverter that runs off of this battery. The inverter could be 2000 watt inverter on this small battery. Now it won't last very long. The battery would need charging pretty quick. So you're looking about 10 minutes. So 2000 watts appliance running off an inverter, drawing from this battery, would drain that battery in about 10 minutes. But it would work. Although the battery's discharge rate is also something that you need to take into account. And the maximum discharge rate is not so good. So although it will provide the inverter to the 2000 watts, it won't probably give it all the current it needs. So your appliance won't run so well, like a Hoover or a washing machine, something like that. You probably need a bigger battery bank. So when you are sizing systems, and this video is not going to go into sizing for multiple battery banks, because that's a whole other world of linking them up in series and parallel and what have you. And that I will have those on the membership videos at a later date. But just going on to that, so 2000 watts coming out of my inverter needs 166 amps, so I need a cable this kind of size. Now, if you're like one of my friends who says they're a qualified solar power fitter, and they're connecting the inverter directly to their charge controller, the cable here is going to really struggle. Even if I chop this thing off here and I've got the end of it, looking about probably 6-7 centimeters wide. The cable inside is probably about maybe not centimeters, millimeters. There's just no way it's going to go in that socket, right? This charge controller, for instance, this one will work with this battery, and it will charge this battery. And we've got a maximum of 15 amps. The charge rate on this battery is about 15 amps, so this will work absolutely fine with this battery. But there's just no way that a cable like that is going to go into the load output of this charge controller. I've got a 50 amp charge controller in the same style as this one on one of my systems, and although the sockets are slightly larger, they're nowhere near as large to cope for these cables, because they don't need to be, because you connect your inverter directly to your battery. Simple as. If anyone tells you otherwise, they are wrong, plain and simple. Look it up. Now, some people were moaning that I was using crocodile clips on my battery in the last video. What they failed to do was watch the whole video. And I do get this. I get people just comment, they just see something and then comment, and then they fast forward past the video and they're not watching the whole thing. I explained several times throughout that video that this was just for demonstration purposes. There's no way I would normally use crocodile clips and the size of wires and everything else. And I said that I was going to explain it in a lot more detail. So please watch the whole video before you comment. It's just irritating. It's just lazy. It's just lazy. Anyway, what we've done is I have soldered these on using my great all singing, all dancing flamethrower blowtorch. And I've used a heat shrink on here as well, just to make the connection nice and solid. But this is absolutely solid on here. It's been soldered in. The cable, it's really good. It's good cable, solid cable. I've got these lugs on here which go on the battery. And they will also connect to the inverter. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to connect the inverter directly to the battery. I'm going to do that now. Now, while I'm doing this, I may as well just connect everything up so you can see it all connected up, and then I'll show you all done and completed. Now, sometimes when you're connecting the final cable to the battery, you will get a bit of a snap. Nothing really to worry about. Just keep your fingers on, sort of away from the actual main terminal if you can. It's usually just a bit more surprising than anything dangerous or anything that's going to cause you injury. Got the battery hooked up to the inverter. Now, I haven't got the charge controller hooked up, but that's okay. The battery can still, the battery's fully charged. I can turn the inverter on and it all still works. So, but obviously that's draining the battery now, because the inverter will draw some power, usually about 10 watts or so, while it's in standby. So I'll turn that off, but that will all work. I've got my USB all set up, so that will power, so that's directly onto the battery here with some decent connectors. So I've got my cigarette lighter there output, which I could use to run like a camping fridge and that kind of stuff, or I can use a USB doodah like you have in your car, so you can put that in there as well. And then we just need to hook up the charge controller, which I'm going to do with these cables here. Right, let's just finish this in the charge controller here. Positive terminal. There we are. Had a nice little spark there, but it's not a big deal. I've got my charge controller connected up. Got my battery connected up to my inverter. My solar panel. The cables coming off the solar panel can then plug into These connectors here, which are actually called MC4 connectors. Thank you, Brian. I got that wrong last time. And they're waterproof connectors, and they just keep the seal them all up together, and then they can go on your roof. And that's pretty much the whole system. Now, obviously, you can have more stuff coming off of here. My charge controller is now Bluetooth into my phone. I'll be able to connect and get a readout on there as well. But the whole idea is that, as I say, you know, all your appliances and everything you're going to run, because obviously you want it to be useful. For it to be useful, you just connect everything else to the battery and go from there. Now, battery sizing. Wires come in a variety of different types of size settings. The most commonly used is something called AWG, which is American wire gauge setting. And you can, if you Google and look up AWG chart, you'll see a chart, and it also corresponds to the thickness of the wire and the current that it's able to handle. So that's what you've got to think about. So you've got to think about from your battery to inverter, how much wattage your appliance is going to be drawing, and then how much using Ohm's law, using the power formula from Ohm's law, you're going to work out from that wattage how many amps. So it's very important to work out the current for your wires. But it's mainly the current. If you put too much current through a wire, it will heat the wire and possibly set fire to the wire. So you don't want that happening. So let's start at the solar panel end. Solar panels, you can buy a special type of wire. It's like single core wire, which is it's not very flexible. It's quite stiff compared to other types of wire, right? And you'll see that when you get it. But so if you do a search for solar power wire, sometimes it will be in AWG, sometimes it will be in the metric system, which will be like 4mm squared, 6mm squared, etc. I provided a chart which I'll pop on screen now for you, but I'll also put a link in there. You just need to be careful because the AWG charts don't necessarily correspond, the diameters of the wires don't necessarily correspond to the actual metric equivalent. So you have the AWG size, which goes from 1 to whatever. The larger the number, the smaller the wire. The smaller the number, the larger the wire. So, for instance, I use AWG 10, which corresponds to 6mm squared cable on the metric system for my solar power input. I've only got 500 watts on one system, I've got 200 watts on another system, and that's more than enough to handle the current. At maximum efficiency, my system would probably give me about 41 amps. I'd never get maximum efficiency, so you're looking probably about 35 amps maybe. In reality, it's probably a lot less. So I've got a charge controller that can handle 50 amps, so that's more than enough for that system. And I've got cabling that will manage 30 to 35 amps. So could probably do with slightly larger cabling, because there's also something called voltage drop, which is another calculation entirely. I'll put the calculation on the screen for you now. And that's how you work out the voltage drop. So yeah, so going from the solar panel to the charge controller, you want to work out the overall wattage of your solar panels, whether they're wired in parallel or series, or I mean, you might just have one solar panel. You know, for instance, this one is 130 watts. If you've got one solar panel, then you're going to need, you can get away with pretty thin cabling, to be honest. On the AWG chart, you could probably get away with 12 or 13, 14 AWG, because you're only going to have about sort of 10 amps max on 130 watts. And a lot of these all powers things or eco flows, deltas systems, the maximum solar panel input on even the largest ones, I think is about 500 to 700 watts. So, you know, you're looking at about 30 to 40 amps. So you're not going to need much more than 10 AWG or even 8 AWG. 8 AWG will give you 40 to 55 amps. That's a 10mm squared metric conversion. It's quite a thick wire. and it's quite expensive as well. So you want to keep your distances short if you can. I've got about 10 meters of cable going from my solar panel to my charge controller, so that's a 20-meter round trip. So the voltage drop for me, if you're working out at 12 volts, this is the thing with the voltage drop, if you're working out at 12 volts, then I've got terrible inefficiencies. But because my MPPT charger changes the voltage, and also my panels, although they're 12 volt panels, they kick out about 22 volts in full sunlight. So when you work that out with the calculation for voltage drop, the voltage drop percentage is a lot lower. It only works out about 3 or 4%, something like that, which is manageable on that distance. And I've got slightly larger cable than I really need. Always go for larger cable than you need, not lower cable than you need, smaller cable than you need. So going from the charge controller to the battery, so remember your solar panel gets plugged into your charge controller then feeds the battery with the power to charge it. So the cables from your charge controller to your battery, it's very important to get the cabling right. I made a big mistake early on this is years ago, when I first set up my system, and I was wondering why my batteries weren't making the maximum or getting the maximum value of all of my solar panels. And I was thinking, why? There's a bright sunny day and they're just not charging. And the reason was I wasn't using thick enough cable for my for the cabling between the charge controller and the battery. So really important. So this particular battery that I've got here will charge at a maximum rate of 30 amps, but the standard rate is about 15 amps, and I've got the charge controller set up to charge at a maximum really of 15 amps, because that's more than enough for what I need. So at 15 amps, then I need cabling that's going to cover 15-20 amps. So what I've got on my charge controller here is, I believe I've got AWG12, which is in the metric system is 4 millimeters squared, and that will handle about 20 to 25 amps. So that's more than enough. If I was to have a larger battery bank and I was to have 30-40 amps going in, I'd need a much thicker cable going from my charge controller to my battery. But again, not so thick you can't get it in there. The thickest cable is going to be from your battery to inverter, because that's where the most current goes through. So from my battery to my inverter, even though I've only got a 300 watt inverter, I might want to increase the system. So I've just gone with a 200 amp capable wire, which is about 1 AWG. I don't know how they calculate it, but I've definitely got the right cable. This cable, it'll cover up to about 200 amps, which is more than enough for what I need. So that's basically how you would gauge the wire of your system. Hopefully I'm making sense so far. If I am, please click the like button. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And by the way, for those that don't know, my name is Steve. I make videos about prepping from a UK perspective. I also have various solar power setups around my house, so I do videos on solar power. And just to reiterate as well, this is not going to be like a professional. I'm not a professional electrician or anything like that at all. I've learned all this off the fly. Sometimes I'll wire stuff together and I won't necessarily weld my own cables together and things like that. This is kind of Mad Max style. This is kind of pick stuff off the floor. What can I use this for? Is it reasonably safe? So when you're wiring your own system, please just check out and make sure you're doing it right for you, for whatever your setup is. All I can give you is just not necessarily advice, but just a bit of guidance based on what I've done. I have made mistakes in the past, and that's because I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional. And I did say earlier on, I've had some people who say that they're trained experts and professionals in solar power, and they're still connecting their inverters to their charge controller. It's just bonkers. So it just shows that even with the training, you can't get it right. But yeah, this is going to be kind of making stuff up as you go, and that's basically what I've been doing. I can pick up a load of old junk. I've got tons of wires around. I've got tons of cable connectors. I've got lots of charge controllers. I've got various inverters around the house. I've got electrical tape, which is a godsend if you're not using soldering or blowtorching. I've got a ton of these little connectors. as well. These lugs that go on the battery and stuff. I hope you can see that all right. But yeah, so things like that. I've got some other small ones that are already sheathed that you just crimp. And I've got loads of those around, so I can knock up a system just like that. You give me any old battery and a load of wires, and I'll pull out a charge controller and wire it up, get a solar panel out, and I'll have a system up and running, within minutes, if not seconds. But it will be a rough job. But if you want something, properly permanent, then great. So I certainly am not qualified or proficient enough to really install solar panels on someone's roof in one of these grid-tied systems. I would not mess with the electrics of the house or anything like that at all. This is completely separate to my house electrics, but it runs really well, and it runs lots of things around my house. And it means that if we did have a situation, where there's a sustained power outage, or a grid down event, then I'd have some power for various things around the house. That's the idea anyway. That's as a prepper, that's what I want. That's what I do. So as I said, I make solar power videos. I also make stuff about outdoors, camping, that kind of thing. It's not all going to be solar power. It's just one thing I'm very interested in and very passionate about. And I'm also very passionate about promoting the fact that you've got to have some sort of power in the event of a grid down situation. And we're seeing our infrastructure being tested, especially with this net zero agenda. They're putting increasing reliability on our electricity infrastructure in the UK. I'm also seeing, I've got a smart meter, and my power company give me the opportunity to get sort of half price electricity because of my smart meter, because it's only you have to have a smart meter to be eligible for these schemes, where I get half price power on weekends and things like that. Basically what they're doing, I know what's going on, they're training me and training customers with smart meters to gradually reduce their energy consumption. Eventually everyone will go over to smart meters. They'll enforce it somehow or other. And that then gives them the opportunity to have more control over your power usage. There is a scheme that's been highlighted to me as well, called I believe it's called the ESEC. If you look it up, it's on the government website. They have, as part of their civil contingencies planning, they have the power to do certain things in the event of a major catastrophe, and it would have to be pretty major. But if there was a major grid down situation, or there was reduced capability for the government to provide power to the whole country, they would do a phased cutting out of your power according to your location. So what I recommend is just look this up, because on your energy bill, doesn't matter who you're with, on your energy bill there'll be a grading or a rating of some sort it's alphabetical, I think, from A to Z. There's a few letters missed out. I'm in A. What that means is they have a grid, and again I'll put a link in the description, and I'll show some details hopefully while I'm talking, where they can phase off your power for 3-hour blocks at certain times during the week or during the day, and according to the severity of the problem, they can phase out more and more and more, to a point where they can just have complete blackout. And there's also something called Operation Black Start, where if there was a complete grid down scenario, I don't know, like an EMP or a nuke strike or a cyber attack that took out the whole grid, that they would gradually phase it back up, and they would probably use this scheme to gradually get people online by giving them power only at certain times of the day, until they got everything completely up and running. But look it up. It's very important, because in a massive national catastrophe, it would have to be pretty bad. They can restrict your power as well. So what I'm saying is it wouldn't have to be a complete grid down for them to maybe enact on this. So it could be a number of other scenarios that mean that they needed to restrict the power. Now, where they're looking at making everything kind of net zero by 2030 or 2035, I just can't see the infrastructure. They would have to massively change our infrastructure to get there, without restricting what people use. So I believe personally that, you know, unless we suddenly start seeing massive changes to our infrastructure, which we haven't, and we've known about this agenda for quite some time, I personally believe that they are going to start restricting power for certain people. Who those people might be, I don't know. You work it out. But it'll probably be the people who maybe can't afford the power or don't have certain things in their homes or certain conditions that they've been asked to meet. But I imagine that's what's going to happen. And I think this, what I've just talked about, is part of that. And they may find ways to enact that earlier rather than later. Yeah, let me know what you think in the comments about that. I'm not going down the conspiracy theory route here, but I do believe that this agenda that they're trying to follow is wholly unrealistic. Because, you know, if you look at sites like GridWatch, you can see on there what we rely on for our power, and you know, mostly it's gas power, turbines for in the power stations, also a bit of nuclear power. We also import power from abroad, but the solar and the wind power and you know, biomass is very low as to what it contributes to the overall grid. So I'll be interested to see what they come up with. But anyway, hope that's been useful. I've talked far too long. Please click the like button if you did like the video. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. As I say, there'll be much more in-depth videos on the memberships site as well, because it's more specialised and it tends to not be of interest to the majority of the of people who are subscribed to the channel, which is why we've made it sort of more exclusive. In the meantime, I've got a few other projects going on as well, which I'll cover in later videos, or sooner videos, hopefully. But for now, thanks for watching and stay prepared.